This is a radio podcast from Centuries of Sound. If you want to hear these a year earlier and help the show survive, please consider supporting Centuries of Sound at Patreon. That's patreon.com/Centuries of Sound. For just $5 or local equivalent per month, you can have access to all of my mixes and radio shows.
On Cambridge 105 Radio.
Hello and welcome to Centuries of Sound, the show where we use archive audio to travel back to the early days of recorded sound. My name is James Errington. I run the website centuriesofsound.com, where I make mixes for every year of recorded sound. And today I'm joined by
Maciek Pawlikowski.
And Maciek, what can you tell us about yourself? You have another show on Cambridge 105.
Yes, I am part of Polish Waves team and has been running that show for quite a while now. I've been in radio before that as well. Before I came to UK as well, in Radio Jacques in Łódź. I'm generally very open to music and listen to all kind of genres. I'm also by education I'm anthropologist, so I like a little bit of folk and I like some old music as well. And I'm really fascinated with your show. It sounds amazing. The archaeology of music. This is how it sounds to me. So thank you for having me tonight.
That's a pleasure. I think it's this kind of early on. I think you never will hear music from before, say, 1917, maybe even 1925. I think you will never come across it in your daily life unless you're a collector of these things. I feel like even 1950 maybe next days.
And it's really difficult to come across the records. How do you collect them?
Well, there's a number of websites that at this stage, for 1913, because today we're talking about 1913, as University of California, Santa Barbara, they have the best website. So many cylinders and discs I have to download there. Archive.org is good for that as well. I don't have any physical discs. I have a record player, but I've used it 2 or 3 times ever. So yeah, this is all electronic, which is not really in the spirit of the thing, is it? But anyway, so this time we're going back to the year 1913. So what's your impression of the world of sound and music in the year 1913?
So, as you said, it's very difficult to come across something really out of the popular music kind of area. The films were silent at the time, so there was only live music kind of experience in the cinema, if you think about it. I would imagine there would be lots of music like on the streets, people playing, maybe busking, or like music boxes on the streets, and kind of this kind of attitude. I recently went to visit one of the music box museum in city of Utrecht in Netherlands, and that was quite interesting experience. So you would have the music boxes like that standing in a big dancing halls, the size of like 3 by 5 meters, something like that, the size of the 3-door wardrobe,
and people dancing
to it. So that's kind of my impression for the first kind of first impression of it, because there isn't like it's difficult to find kind of recordings, bootlegs, live music, and very early kind of radios recording, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, those radio kind of exists at this point, but not in the sense we have now. We didn't really have speech radio for another 6 or 7 years after this, and no recordings for a good 15 years. I think music boxes are interesting. I started this project with 1853, which is the first sound recording, really. That's where I kind of cut it off. But of course there's music boxes before that playing whole tunes which sound the same, and fairground organs, I suppose.
Yeah. And a part of that you'll be having chamber music, probably. That's
sure.
Kind of the thing which survived in the notation as the tradition of carrying that music to the later times and replaying it again, so would be accurate enough to try it.
We have I think it's 3,000-year-old, the oldest notated music is 3,000 years old. It's a hymn from the Middle East, a civilization there,
right?
But yeah, I'm not going back that far. that's for sure.
Not tonight.
No, not tonight. Although it is interesting if you want to type in oldest known music.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting.
It is on YouTube.
So the oldest I came across was ancient Greece theater kind of recreation of it. It didn't sound like music really. It was more like different kind of bells and bowls full of stones and this kind of stuff. It didn't sound like music on its own, to be honest. Who knows
how many amazing sounds have been over the years, and we just have no idea now. It's but it's gone forever. Yeah, unfortunately.
And obviously, in our European tradition, what else? Probably places as we usually do. You go somewhere to the public house, and there are some people playing on a piano, maybe some people playing fiddle in a corner or things like that.
Yeah. So I think the folk tradition will be kind of coming through in different ways. Well, we'll see how it goes. I think a lot of what we've been listening to is conservative music, I'll put it like that. The shock of the new is really missing from what we've heard. There've been like glimpses from time to time of futures which did or didn't happen, but on the whole, popular culture seems to have been happy enough to just kind of trundle on, making gradual progress. Nothing to shock the parents, really. That was a deal at this point. But 1913, that's kind of the end of this era. That's the end of that. Your parents can listen to the same music as you. Something is really changing now.
Do you think is it because of the First World War?
Not yet, because it's that's still a year away, and it's not the start of the jazz age either, because that's still maybe 4 years away. This is a strange thing. It's the hot ragtime and foxtrot craze of 1913, 1914. A proper moral panic on both sides of the Atlantic, in style and in consumption, and complete opposite to the image we have perhaps of a boring Edwardian society.
Were there any musicals at the time yet?
There's plenty of musicals. Broadway is... I mean, if you think of Gilbert and Sullivan, that's the standard of musicals still at this point, really. Scott Joplin wrote a musical as well, based around ragtime, which wasn't performed until quite recently, I think. So yeah, this is hot ragtime we're going to hear. So it's kind of strange. We think of ragtime as being a piano-based music, but it was really... that was the form of it that was like disseminated among people. It wasn't the form you would hear from day to day. It's kind of a repurposing of history. And when you hear ragtime, you hear bands playing ragtime usually, or banjos as well. But in this case, it's a guy called Jim Reese Europe, and this is one of his own compositions. It's called Down Home Rag, and let's hear what his band sounded like, and then we'll have a little talk about it. Okay, so that was Europe Society Orchestra with Down Home Rag. And I think that's quite an unusual recording as far as I'm concerned. I've never heard anything else quite like that.
No?
Is that... I'm sure that's not really your expectation of what ragtime music sounds like.
To be honest, I don't have expectations. I wasn't sure what was the genre.
I think people, if they think about ragtime, they might think about, Scott Joplin's kind of piano-based music, really. Mm-hmm. Whereas what we have there is... 30, 40 guys with banjos strumming away like crazy.
It also sounds really quick. You can hear one guy playing the banjo and it sounds quick. Now the 40 of them makes even more impressive.
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting guy, this James Reese Europe. He was born in Alabama in the Reconstruction era, and he moved to New York and formed something called the Clef Club. It's a society for black musicians, which also functioned as an orchestra, the first all-black orchestra in history, and one which only played compositions by black composers. So apart from the string, wind and brass instruments and a large bass drum, they had loads of mandolins, guitars, banjos and ukuleles, and they strummed them in unison to produce this kind of deafening melodic rhythm. That was his deal. It sounds like maybe that was within a kind of a ghetto environment, but it wasn't. He was performing at Carnegie Hall a year before this, which was kind of unheard of at the time. And this was a couple called Irene and Vernon Castle, and they were a couple who they're credited with the popularization of lots of different dances, including the foxtrot.
All right.
So you can imagine these two kind of... they look like ballroom dancers on a stage performing in front of a prestigious audience with this gigantic black orchestra all playing on these different stringed instruments behind them.
Obviously, if you had a big party, you needed lots of musicians. You didn't have amplifiers at the time, so...
No. I mean, you've got to be loud.
You've got to be loud,
in those big environments. It's I mean, you go to see an orchestra now and there's no amplification there. That's the deal.
That's the deal, yeah.
Microphones are, even on recordings, we don't really have microphones yet. So if you imagine a recording studio, you've got all these guys playing into a horn, a metal horn. Yeah. That's kind of halfway through a curtain. So they're fitting as many as they can into that little room. That's the most important music of this year, I would say. Let's have a listen to the same song again. It was composed by Jim Reese Europe, and this is performed in a more traditional way by a single banjo player, although actually he has two other musicians with him. It's a guy called Fred Van Epps. Previously, I think the musician maybe we've heard most on the show is a guy called Wessel Osman, who's a banjo virtuoso. He's kind of fading away, and his protege, copycat, is Fred Van Epps. And Fred Van Epps would be the famous one going forward from this stage. I don't know if we can hear Wessel Osman again, unfortunately. This is a different version of the same song, but this time not with that kind of deafening thing, but played in a slightly more traditional way. Okay, that was Fred Van Epps with Down Home Rag. The same song we heard previously, but there
not as busy,
and you can actually kind of hear the tune behind it. So you can hear how well it is composed. It isn't just a racket. It is a properly composed song with proper kind of musical ideas there. So ragtime, we have that kind of it's syncopation. There's like two different rhythms working against each other.
Very quick.
Yeah, it's a very quick song. Ragtime
so in a
doesn't
way,
always need to be that quick.
It makes sense why it was played on banjo that much, because banjo is this kind of instrument where you can make it sound busy. Yeah,
I think it's we're in the middle here. Previously, banjo's been a kind of a solo instrument where they pluck out individual notes, and from this point onwards, and going into like jazz as well. Early days of jazz, you use kind of banjo as a percussive instrument, just kind of strumming away as percussion, which that's why the banjo was the big instrument this time. It was really very important. The guitar, not so much. We'll hear a bit of guitar later, but banjo was way ahead of guitar at this point in terms of popularity. Let's have one more bit of ragtime, or the hot band ragtime of this point. This is Prince's band. Prince's band is the band of a Mr. Charles A. Prince. He was the musical director for Columbia Records. He had a monocle and he had a moustache, very much a kind of respectable person in the recording industry. But you can hear he's joining in with the craze and playing this hot dance ragtime music like anyone else. So strange things are afoot. Okay, so that was Too Much Mustard by Prince's Band from the year 1913. You're listening to Centuries of Sound on Cambridge 105 Radio. So what did you make of that?
That's been a very interesting melodic turn somewhere in there. Very different from the previous songs.
Yeah, I think it was more clear. It's kind of more clearly cut out there. I think that's the kind of melody we expect with ragtime music.
Yeah.
Kind of Scott Joplin rags, things like that, which we're kind of moving away from a bit here. The tradition that his band are coming from, and that all of these things are coming from, is the kind of American marching band tradition of like John Philip Sousa, the US Marine Band, which seems the other side of the coin completely to ragtime music. It's like, instead of being anarchic, it's really regimented, military marching music, but it's got that kind of it's got that energy and that drive forward, which is part of what makes especially early jazz work. Is having that kind of band tradition of marching around, which seems kind of strange. You think of jazz as being much more kind of loose and not regimented, but
no,
it's one of the elements that makes early jazz. Is like the antithesis of jazz, which is a strange thing.
like New Orleans kind of style.
Yeah, well, we've got it's a few years after this still. There is jazz going on in New Orleans, which is frustrating. Something we definitely call jazz now.
Okay.
But no one's bothering to go down there and record it.
Oh no.
The recording industry is in New York and
kind of a Dixieland stuff. Would that be again the band which is more for marching and those? Well,
Dixieland is the early style of jazz in its first kind of 15 years or so, and there'll be kind of a revival of that later on. They would say we want to go back to the old style, so that would be, they call it Dixieland at that point. But that's it's the same thing as jazz really for the next 10 years or so. We don't really know so well what jazz sounded like at this point, because it's being made in New Orleans.
And when did it become jazz?
It's 1917 is the first jazz
1917.
recording.
And how do you know it's jazz?
It announces itself as jazz.
All right.
So
this is where they made up the word.
The original Dixieland Jazz Band are the first jazz recording artists, really. Although, we'll see how contentious that is a bit later. But I think there's plenty of things which you could call jazz a bit earlier on. Would you call any of that we've heard so far jazz?
I'm not sure, actually. Yeah.
It's hard to say.
Hard to say, yeah, because the lines are blurred probably in the early stages of that. If you say, do you know any jazz musicians who are playing banjo? I would say probably not. At the time,
when you hear the change into jazz in 1917, it's really noticeable. It's something's going on there. So
right. Something different.
Yeah, it's kind of the improvisation.
Right.
I'd say is the main thing. It's and not real improvisation, just kind of the appearance that they're just going off.
Here we still have this situation when they might be marching and they.
Yeah, everything is very well organised still at this point.
Yeah.
A lot of songs around the start of jazz talk about how wild and crazy it is and unpredictable. At the beginning, there's a lot more songs about jazz than actual jazz songs for the first year or so. It just tells you something about the music industry of that point, really, rather than anything else. Let's hear something that's not music, even. This is, although he does do a bit of singing, this is a guy called Murray K. Hill. We've heard from him a couple of times already. He's a vaudeville comic. His real name was Joseph Tunnicliffe Pope Jr., and it's just to give an idea of what else people would enjoy as entertainment at this point, the kind of comedy that was popular, and we'll see if it makes you laugh.
Well, how are the gentlemen of the orchestra this evening? Fine. Listen to this. That's all right. Say, don't do that. Don't do that. You make me nervous. I have 8 home already. I'm going to try and sing you a little song, a little thing entitled, When the Sun Sows His Wild Oats, It's Time for the Father to Thrash. My sweetheart is a florist, and when his love he tells, from roses and geraniums. He hands me lots of smells. I cannot love that livery man. For money I care not, for a greenhouse has a fragrance that his stable it ain't got. You know, I always feel better after singing that song, and I certainly do feel happy this evening. I just received this dispatch that my brother will not die. He will not die. It's from Ohio.
Well, read it.
Your brother will not die next Friday. The governor...
I see.
Now, who's to blame for all of this?
Well, who is to blame?
Why, the trust. Let me draw you a picture. Come with me to the slums of this great city. Get in an elevator and climb 14 flights of rickety stairs. Entering that basement next to the roof, what do you behold? Seated around an oil stove are 14 small children. 14 small children, the oldest scarcely 2 years old, all crying for pie. Why?
Well, why?
Why, the high cost of living. Everything is going up. I suppose now my brother will be
What?
gone. I meant to say that since they put a tariff on lumber, board is getting higher. I know that meals are coming up. You can't keep a 15-cent dinner down. And now they have an undertaking trust.
Is that so?
Why, funerals are getting so high the poor man can't even afford to die. Of course, it wasn't going to cost my brother nothing to die. I meant to say that seated around an oil stove are 14 small children.
14.
These children should have lots of money. Their father was a rich porter in a bank.
Yes?
And he died and left lots of money
Is that so?
in the bank. They shot him while he was trying to get it out.
Oh, I see.
And yet we wonder at crime. Why, I was reading this morning's paper where 2 burglars broke into John D. Rockefeller's home the other night. They were very lucky burglars.
Lucky burglar.
I should say so. They got out without losing anything. So I said to the other burglar...
What?
Seated around an oil stove are 14 small children. When hark, there's a knock at the door, and the landlord enters and tells him he's going to raise the rent. That's very kind of the landlord.
Why?
Why, because they can't raise it themselves, which brings us down to the law of compensation. Now, maybe you don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't.
Neither do I, so I'll explain. The law of compensation is if you lose one part of your anatomy, the other part is going to become stronger. For instance, if you have 2 strong eyes, you lose one eye, the one eye will be as strong as the 2 eyes were before you lost the one, and you'll take just as big an eye open in the morning. Or if your back is bent in the front of your back, the front of your back will be straighter than the back of your back. Or if you have one short leg, the other leg is bound to be longer.
Well?
Well, seated around an oil stove with these 14 small children.
14.
14 small children. There they've sat for the past 30 years.
30 years.
No, say, what am I going to do with these kids anyhow? I think I'll sing another song and kill them off.
Okay, some comedy there from Mr. Murray Cahill.
Entertaining piece.
Entertaining. Were you laughing out loud?
A little bit. I'm not a loud laugher, I think.
Okay.
Try to catch up with the accent and the different kind of English they talk.
Quite
interesting. Different words.
It was rapid fire humour.
For me as a foreigner, it's like, oh, I need to catch up with that.
Yeah.
And then, the funny bit, poor man cannot afford to die, yeah? And everything is going up.
Yeah, there's a joke about his brother's going to be executed going on through it, which it's hard to work out what the joke is sometimes. But yeah, so it goes. All right, let's go on a world tour. We're going to go to a few different places around the world. First of all, well, this is kind of New York, but it's representing Eastern European Ashkenazi Jewish music.
Mm-hmm.
Is the deal. This is one of the earliest klezmer recordings. What can you tell us about klezmer? Are you familiar with the genre of klezmer?
A little bit, yes. Very often they use the 2 instruments I really like. First is clarinet, which is, I think, one of the best ever instruments for listening. For playing, I'm not sure about. I tried once, it didn't go very well. And mandolin. Actually, you can find some or the fiddle. So there are different versions there. One of my favorite klezmer musicians contemporary is Giora Feidman, and he's more like jazz klezmer. So when I think about klezmer, it already feels more like jazz.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing because there is klezmer going through to the modern day and hasn't necessarily changed that much. There's been some jazz influences. Of
Yeah,
course.
there are different influences and different kind of infusions, I would say. But yeah, it's a music I like, definitely.
The tradition goes on through recorded music out the other end. So let's hear one of the earliest klezmer recordings then. This is Abe Ellenkrig's Yiddische Orchestra.
On Cambridge 105 Radio.
Okay, that was Abe Ellenkrig's Yiddish Orchestra with Von der Chup. I think I've pronounced that correctly, but it's quite likely I haven't. So how does that compare to the klezmer music you're more used to then?
Well, it's a bit different. Although this song sounds familiar, the melody of it. And I think that's one of the thing about ethnography of the music, of the folklore, because Yiddish, the klezmer, is a kind of a folklore, if you think about it.
Yeah.
It's very much attached to the ethnic group who was playing it. So it sounds like very often the patterns repeat and they spread in the geographical kind of proximity. So if you have the Greek music, for instance, you will find very similar tunes in Turkey, even though they are not really the same kind of thing. So it sounds like I think there was Italian tune which used the same melody in all fragments of it. So it's quite interesting. Yeah, I like it.
The music I find closest to klezmer music, I'd say, is the kind of Balkan gypsy brass band music. I think quite often I can't tell the difference so much.
All right.
But going into Greece like Rembetika, I can really hear something there as well.
Yeah.
But especially that kind of gypsy brass band music.
This particular one sounds to me a bit with Italian touch, to be honest, for some reason. I don't know why. When I think about Balkan music, I think about Goran Bregovic and this kind of very heavy brass, I would say. Very quick as well.
Okay. Well, let's hear something else from Central Eastern Europe. I'm not sure exactly where to pinpoint him because it's a strange character. It's a guy called George Vintilescu, and he's a Romanian conductor, and he was resident in Berlin in this period before the First World War, and he introduced all this kind of two-step, cakewalk, tango, ragtime music. He was the guy bringing all that over from America to Europe. But at the same time, he was leading this kind of Romanian orchestra to play it in Berlin. So quite a combination of different things there. Let's see if we can tell the difference between his version and the original American version we heard earlier. Right, so that was George Vintilescu with Chatterbox Rag, and I think that just sounds like the hot dance ragtime music we've heard previously.
Yeah,
I can't really hear much difference there.
No, I feel like there is a bit more distinction between the different sections of the instruments.
Yeah,
maybe it's the way they recorded as well.
I feel
it doesn't sound so busy.
Yeah, I think it's just more kind of a traditional recording. I mean, it's still a little old-fashioned by this point, perhaps. Maybe that's what's going on there.
And maybe this syncopating rhythm is not as much emphasized.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of crazy kind of wall of sound stuff is that's Jim Europe's.
Then Europe's okay. That's specific to him.
Yeah, that's it. That's his thing only, and he's going to be important in the development of jazz in a few years' time. Very important in Europe as well. He'll come. Jim Reese will come to Europe and with the Americans in the First World War and play all around France and the UK.
All right.
Let's go to South America. This is a guy we've played a couple of times. It's Agustin Barrios. He's called. He's a guitar player, and as I said, guitar is not the main instrument at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It is classical guitar, but he's kind of, you could say he's the guy that brought the guitar into the mainstream. He's a very important recording artist with the guitar, and this is Aires Andaluces, I think, air of the Andalusian place or something like that.
Will it sound a little bit more like flamenco then, you think?
I don't think it sounds that flamenco-y. It sounds classical to me, I would describe it. But you can judge for yourself. So lots to comment on there. So Agustin Barrios with Aires Andaluces, that Paraguayan virtuoso classical guitarist. What kind of thing would you think that is? Is it connected to flamenco?
Yeah, I mean, you can hear a few notes here and there, the same as you would in Tarregas sometimes, or Albenites, I would say. So the guys who were playing a bit earlier on in Spain, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, you're right. It's totally classical.
I think you can kind of hear the mood of the tango.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well.
I agree with that. And with flamenco, you would have different rhythms as well going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Very specific to the regions, probably as well. And this one is very nice, very nice.
Yeah.
Guitar at the time, was not a very popular instrument and very difficult to play.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
We've got jazz guitarists coming in the late 20s, early 30s, going to transform that. But yeah, classical guitar is where it's at for now.
I don't remember when did that happen, but I think there was a technical issue in terms of playing guitar and resonating the sound in terms of using nylon strings. I don't remember when did that happen, and the metal strings when they started being used on the guitar. So that was kind of the thing I remember from the history of music a bit.
Well, as we've got, these are all acoustic recordings, so this is the vibrations are directly making the needle move into the wax here. So it's that distorts things and it cuts out high and low frequencies, so it stops. There are lots of instruments which don't record that well in that kind of medium, and that will change when we get to the mid-20s when we get electronic recording microphones finally.
Right.
And things become a lot more listenable.
So another thought I had, I mentioned Albenites and Tarrega. It sounded like definitely Tarrega was the one who promoted the classical guitar in his homeland in Spain in that context, I think. And that sounded like maybe that's been somehow inherited in here. Yeah. In the way, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's possible. Yeah. If anyone wants to tell me all about the works of Mr. Barrios, he's an amazing guitar player. I'd say definitely.
Yeah, sounds really good.
Let's come very close to home. Well, but the UK. This is a song from Scotland by not Mr. Sir Harry Lauder. Sir Harry Lauder, we have heard from him before. Are you familiar with the works of Sir Harry Lauder?
I'm afraid not.
That's okay. He's not that famous these days, but he was a huge star at this point. He was described by Winston Churchill as Scotland's greatest ever ambassador. Mm-hmm. And by 1911, so 2 years before this, he'd become the highest paid performer in the world. And he was the first British artist to sell a million records. So, Big deal.
Big deal, yeah.
He went all in on the Scottishness, as you will hear now, and he performed in the full Highland regalia, kilt, sporran, tam o'shanter, twisted walking stick, and always sung Scottish-themed songs. This one's called She's the Lass for Me.
It was on a bonny summer day, the sun was shining clear. I went away on a holiday and I met a dear wee dear. She looked so neat, a perfect treat, her eyes were full of bliss. And ever since I kissed her face, I'm always singing this. She's the lass for me, she's the lass for me. I've never seen another face that could ever take her place. She has locked my heart and stolen away the key. She is, yes she is, she's the lass for me. Her age is only 21 on the 6th of next July. I'd like to buy her something nice, but I don't know what to buy. I'd like to buy her a tartan tie and a bonny wee tartan box. For she's been kind to me, she's knitted me 20 pairs of socks. I think the best present I could give her would be myself. Because ever since I met her, I can neither eat, sleep, nor work. I never was a very big eater anyway, because 3 eggs and 3 rolls and 3 cups of tea and a plate of porridge was all I could ever take for my breakfast any morning. And I was always a light sleeper, because if the cat happened to be chasing a mouse through the night and across my face, I was up in a minute. But wait till I show you this. Wait till I show you what I've got in my purse here. Of course, you can't see it, you know, but you can imagine that you can see it. I've got something in here, I'm telling you, that I know perfectly well that when still may... No, I've lost it. I'd have threatened a bit with a hole in it. But speaking about work, well, that's a disease that I never had. I really believe, you know, speaking about diseases, I really believe, you know, that love is a disease, and I wonder if you take it twice. If I had to go through this again, I'd go to Canada. Because mind, I'm telling you, I believe that every young fella here the next have got the love disease just the very same as what I've got it. Only it hasn't broken out on you yet. But I'll tell you this, and this is that. You'll easily know when you've got the disease. I mean the love disease, do you see? You'll easily know because whenever you see your lass coming down the street or going up the street or crossing the street or, well, it doesn't matter, wherever you see her, the very first thing you do is start and sing into yourself. She's the lass for me, she's the lass for me. I've never seen another face that could ever take her place. She has locked my heart and stolen away the key. She is, yes she is. I can hear every one of you fellas singing it there. She's the lass for me. I've never seen another face that could ever take her place. She has locked my heart and stolen away the key. She is, yes she is, she's the lass for me. Lie dum, die dum, diddly dum,
All right, so that was Sir Harry Lauder with "She's the Lass for Me." A
Very
Taste of
entertaining.
Scotland. Yeah, he's an
I
entertaining man.
I love his rolling R.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much he's putting it on for the recording or whether that's his... I'm sure that's how he really talked. That's his whole deal, isn't it?
He sounds like he was a personality, that's for sure.
I think I would like to hear from some Scottish people.
What do you think?
What's your opinion of Sir Harry Lauder these days? Is he perpetuating a stereotype? I mean, he's not perpetuating it now, is he? He's long in the grave. But how does it bear up now? Is it something that sounds embarrassing or something that sounds nostalgic from this point? Talking about marginalised groups such as the Scottish, this is Bert Williams. Bert Williams is a very important person in the history of recorded music, I would say. He's the first black performer to really own the world of recorded music, and hugely popular performer at this time. And in a time when I spent a lot of time editing down the selections of music here, and there's still huge amount of racist and blackface music going on, okay. Even at this point, really. And he's presenting this kind of more genuine experience as a person who's the real life kind of sufferings of life, I'd say, not in a humorous way as well, in a way that kind of expresses his humour in the way he can look on the world like that. This is Bert Williams with "Borrow From Me."
I met a manager here on the street yesterday. Said, "I'm got a great part for you to play, and I'm so sure you can get up in it right away. I want you to just listen and see now how sweet it sounds. I'm going to take out in a day or so Uncle Tom's Cabin. You know, it's a marvelous show. My cast is most complete, you know, but I thought I'd like to have you to play the Bleed Hound." I said, "Well, bring me the czar brushes. Just have him come on over here and blacken up and play Uncle Tom's part. From Mark the lawyer, I expect we better have Mr. Othello. Provided, that is, we can find a brother that doesn't come too dark. We'll have the Statue of Liberty to play Miss Eva, and Rip Van Winkle playing the grease. Now, if you can bring me for the calf, them folks I've asked you to bring, oh boy, the bleed hound's hard for me. Every time they get a plan where they think that they might need a man who they'd like to have laying 5 or 10, seems like they first test my generosity. I've loaned my coin out day by day to different brothers who took oaths they'd pay. But these few words I want to say for fear there's any present wants to touch me. If you bring me the stone that David slew Goliath with, and from the apple Adam ate, just bring me the corn. Bring me a leaf from the very same tree that the dove carried that branch back to Brother Noah. Bring me that lion that let Daniel live, and the whale that swallowed Jonah in the sea. Now, if he can bring me everything that I'm asking him to bring, no more than he can just borrow from me. Bring me the stone that David slew the lion with, and from the apple Adam ate, bring me the coal. Bring me a leaf from the very same tree that the dove carried the branch back to Brother Noah. Bring me that lion that let down your little lamb, the whale that swallowed Jonah in the sea. Bring me everything that I'm asking him to bring an old boy, and he can borrow from me.
This is Centuries of Sound on Cambridge 105 Radio, and that was Mr. Bert Williams with Borrow From Me from the year 1913.
Mm.
So what do you make of Mr. Williams?
Very we were talking about radio before, and since spoken radio only came later, it sounds like something like predecessor of it, because he was like talking a lot, he was telling a story, and then the music was really the background for the story.
It's that kind of vaudeville performance.
Yeah.
I think that's how they kind of got used to it, or kind of music hall, we'd call it in the UK.
Very nice voice, very nice, calm voice.
Yeah, you can hear him kind of talking to you personally.
And then
the
it goes into the kind of melodic stage as well.
Yeah. He does kind of speaking and singing, kind of goes between.
It's a nice mix. It sounds like the entertaining performance. Yeah.
Now let's see the other side of this, which is another performer. Bert Williams is past his peak at this point, really. But this is a new performer who's coming up, called Al Jolson. You may have heard of Al Jolson. Al Jolson, later on, he would find huge amounts of fame as the star of the first talkie. He's a unique performer on the stage, and the one thing that you would find out about him straight away, really, is that he's a white blackface performer. So he would put burnt cork on his face and do an imitation of a black man singing, which is obviously very racist. It is also the standard of the last 50 to 100 years in America. So it's a difficult thing to get rid of entirely, and elements of minstrelsy is what we call it. Elements of that will continue right up into the jazz age as well. And the jazz singer, it's called, but he's basically doing a minstrel show performance at that point still. So there's a lot against him in that sense. But he's a unique performer who is one of the most memorable voices of all time as well. So
I wonder. You said it was a standard kind of way of acting at the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would the people? I wonder whether people who would be listening to it or watching it would be different kind of people, or would it be geographically spread? As you said, America mainly rather than Britain. So
I mean, for the majority of people buying records at this point, they are rich white people.
Right.
in the coastal areas of the USA. That's who buys records at this point, really. But it's not going to be as they would say, a race record.
Mm-hmm.
Those don't really exist at this point because they don't think there's a market to sell that.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really thinking of themselves and people like them. That is the record company executives in New York when they record anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go from one side to the other. There's some of them is kind of horrific racial caricatures, and to the other end, which I'd say Al Jolson's right at the other end, is sympathetic character portrayals in their songs, and he's got such a strong personality that kind of shines through. He's not a New Yorker. He's from Eastern Europe originally, and so he's modern day Russia, emigrated as a small child. But it's got such a kind of distinctive voice and distinctive sound that it kind of overwhelms all of that baggage behind it. Although the theme of the song is a specific kind of African American one. It's about Pullman porters. Pullman porters, they were men hired to work on railroads as porters on sleeping cars. There's a guy called George Pullman. He sought out former slaves after the American Civil War, and formed this kind of, it's called the Pullman Company, and they were the porters on American railroads. It's one of those, it's one of the few professional careers that an African American man could do. And later on, in 1925, there was the first all-black union was the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. So it's an important cultural thing in America. I don't think he really gets all that down in this song, that's for sure. But it's an interesting moment in history to hear anyway. So it's Al Jolson with Pullman Porters Parade.
Come down the street, see them come and get a drum, how they beat. Get a drum and number one little hunt, better run to the fun. They're parading, get a yell from the boys. On the left, can't you tell by the noise that we're missing all the fun? Come and see that big parade, my honey. Just see those Pullman porters, dolls up in perfume water. Walk by their time, their quarters. Get it come, get it come, get it come. Just see those stocks up hollers. Yeah, how the captain hollers. Keep time, keep time. It's worth $1,000 to see those tip collectors, those above inspectors, those Pullman porters on parade. Look at flat-footed Mose, see him juggling his hat as he goes. See him struggling the bow-legged Joe, don't he go rather slow? Watch him stepping on the ground like a hen, falling clover, see those round-shouldered men, stooping over Omaha. That's what I call some parade, my honey. Just see those stocks up collars, yeah, how the captain hollers. Keep time, it's worth $1,000 to see those tip collectors, those upper berth inspectors, those Pullman porters on parade. To see those tip collectors, those above berth inspectors, those Pullman porters on parade.
That was Al Jolson with Pullman Porters Parade. Such a distinctive voice, I think. Doesn't doesn't sound like he's doing an impression of anyone at all, just himself, really.
He's got a very interesting voice, as you mentioned. It's
theatrical.
Yeah,
I would say.
There is certain amount of expression in there. Like feels like a bit like musical, kind of a thing.
It's
and with this melody also very, very distinctive.
Unique. I would say.
Unique, yeah, and maybe from all the songs we heard so far, to me sounds the more similar to jazz, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, he would be.
Maybe
he would make that film, The Jazz Singer, later on. I don't know how much it sounds like jazz. What is jazz? We'll discuss that later on. That's for sure.
There were a few notes here and there which were like a bit different. I don't know.
So, should we hear the biggest recording artist of the year? The biggest recording artist of this age.
So Bill wasn't. Because he was very famous.
Yeah, no? They're all I mean, like Al Jolson's famous, Burt Williams famous, Harry Lauder's famous. These guys are all big deals at this point. However, there's one star who is bigger than anyone else. Let's. I'll surprise you. Let's just have a listen. This is if you were going out and buying a record, because we do records at this point rather than wax cylinders. If you're going out and buying that at this point, this is like the number one bestseller of 1913. So, do you know who that was?
Sounds a bit Italian-like.
Yeah, he's Italian. It's Enrico Caruso.
Oh, right.
This opera was a big deal at this point.
Was it? Yeah, very atmospheric, and the intro was like film music.
Yeah,
it's kind of
very atmospheric.
So that was that's the question I wanted to ask you about. When people were buying record at the time, how would they know what they are really buying, and how the process would look like? Do we know anything about that? Would there be like places where you can listen to the records?
Yeah, for sure. Well,
would you hear it in a pub or in the other place you walk into?
Not so much,
really.
but they have listening parlours at record shops. So, like they look like stethoscopes they're putting on. Yeah, you can listen in. That's how music would be consumed originally, rather than being played.
Yeah, because nowadays we just hear it everywhere. You switch on the radio. I mean, nowadays. Well, we're listening on the headphones all the time.
Yeah, so it's similar. This is
car.
kind of being consumed like that. This one, you notice the higher production values. This is Diamond Disc. This is called.
Oh, right.
This is Thomas Edison. He he liked cylinders. That was his deal. He was making cylinders. He didn't want anything to do with discs. But then people persuaded him, finally, discs are where it's at. So then he made these things called diamond discs. Now, cylinders and discs work differently. You've got your needle on a record, if you can think about that groove. The needle's moving from side to side and making this kind of track.
Right.
With a cylinder, it doesn't move from side to side, it moves up and down. And Edison didn't feel like changing that. He thought that was the best way to do it. So he made these discs, which, because the needle was going up and down, the discs needed to be very thick indeed. So if you've got a pound coin, it's 2 pound coins on top of each other. That's how thick these discs were. I've got a picture here. Right. You can have a look. So if you search for Edison Diamond disc, you can see what these look like. It's huge things. But yeah, they could get a little bit more music on, and the production values could be much higher. Was able to actually see one of these up close before, and it's quite an amazing thing. It could only be played on that particular machine.
Oh wow!
But these are worth quite a bit these days, and they're the only disc records that Edison ever made, really.
Right.
And expensive, of course, very expensive. So is there anything else from the year 1913 that we should speak about?
Oh,
what do you think?
Like the things to mention.
Yeah.
So I think I didn't know that much about it, but there were a few things I kind of thought preparing for the show.
Okay.
As a historical events, which are kind of interesting. Would you like to hear any of those?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Swedish engineer Mr. Sundback of Hoboken patented all-purpose zipper, something we cannot imagine life without nowadays.
Okay.
So this is when he did it.
Life without zips.
Without zips, how would he do it? Buttons.
Yeah, well, I guess so.
And there was a first woman parachuting from the airplane.
And she was okay?
Yeah, she was okay. Tiny Broad, that was her name. And also, on that year, the world's official highest record of temperature has been recorded.
Okay.
And hasn't been beaten until today.
Today?
But, yeah.
This day?
So, yeah, it was 134 degrees on Fahrenheit. Wow. And 56.7 degrees of Celsius. Now, there are some people who think that could have been because of the faulty thermometer.
Okay, does sound like it. I can't believe it was really that
it's
hard.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
So, and one very important thing for Britain, I think everybody would be proud of, invention of stainless steel by Harry Brearley in Sheffield.
Oh, of course, Sheffield Steel. Yeah,
Sheffield Steel.
Big deal for the next 50 years or so.
And there is very interesting story which I know a bit more of because I work in cultural heritage. So Mona Lisa has been recovered after 2 years.
Oh, it was
from
stolen,
Louvre.
wasn't it?
Yes, it was stolen 2 years before, and that was the. It appeared 2 years after in Italy, brought by a crazy Italian porter who used to work in Louvre. But the story is more complicated than that.
Okay.
But it's quite long. Basically, it was about making the forgeries and selling the forgeries to the rich people who probably, at the time in different countries. And after those 2 years, they did plan to return the Mona Lisa anyway, because they knew they don't want to sell the original.
How would you sell it?
How would you sell it? So they only sold the forgeries to people who thought it's original, and now those forgeries are really valuable.
Wow. Not as valuable as having the actual Mona Lisa, though. But Still not bad.
Interesting.
They got some of their money back, or their descendants did anyway.
And the last, which I mentioned, was the Igor Stravinsky, and his ballet score, The Rite of Spring, was premiered in Paris and provoked riots. People did not believe that actually someone can play this kind of music. It was too modern for the time.
Wow.
And they booed it, and some of them walked off the theaters. One critic who admitted that he came back for the second showing, so the only 2 shows, and then the show was banned.
Wow.
For some time. So, it was a bit controversial.
I guess these guys never heard Jim Reese Europe Society Orchestra. No. Yeah, they would have become crazy. Wow. Okay. Well, let's have one more song before we wrap up. This is Toots Packer's Hawaiians. Toots Packer was a woman who was she was an instrumentalist leading a all-female hula band, and they had a Broadway show which was introducing Americans to Hawaii, Hawaiian culture and Hawaiian music in the early 1900s. So this is called Pulupe. It's by Toots Packer's Hawaiians.
of Sound on Cambridge 105 Radio.
You've been listening to Centuries of Sound on Cambridge 105 Radio. I've been James Errington.
And Maciek Pawlikowski.
And if you'd like to find out more about Centuries of Sound, I have a website. It's centuriesofsound.com. I've got mixes of every year up to 1922 currently, and aiming to take it all the way through to the present day. Got ones for 2016 to 2018 up there as well, if you're interested in those. If you want to get in touch, I'm on all the usual social media places, or you can email me at james@centuriesofsound.com. And where can we hear from you these days?
At Cambridge 105 Radio, every Sunday, 5 o'clock. So, yeah, if you want to get in touch and you have some Polish connections, would you like to share it, or you want to tell us about Polish events around for Polish community or about Polish community, it's polishwaves at cambridge105.co.uk.
Okay, great. So what did you make then of the year 1913?
1913, very, very wide range. I think much more than I could have expected, to be honest. Not just the music boxes.
No.
Certainly.
Although, interesting you say music boxes, because we have something that's it's like the music box plus we can call it. It's a piano roll. Going to finish with a piano roll.
Yeah.
So the audio will be clearer than for anything else we've heard, and I don't think we can usually include piano rolls. It's a bit of a cheat. I guess. I don't know. It's not really recorded music as such. But in this case, I can't help but include it because it's amazing. This is Mr. Claude Debussy, who recorded a piano roll of his own music. So we can actually hear Debussy playing his own piano.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and
that's pretty good.
This is Le Vent dans la Plaine. Do you speak French? I don't speak French, really.
No, not really.
But yeah, let's play out with Claude Debussy playing one of his own tunes. And then, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the Centuries of Sound podcast. If you want to hear these a year earlier and help the show survive, please consider supporting Centuries of Sound at Patreon. That's patreon.com/Centuries of Sound. For just $5 or local equivalent per month, you can have access to all of my mixes and radio shows.